Today, we're looking at a magenta ink by Papier Plume Burgundy. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, there's timestamps down below so that you can skip around to the parts you're most interested in, or if you watch the whole thing, I'd appreciate you. You can follow me on Instagram, and if you're new here and like fountain pen inks as much as I do, I would invite you to subscribe. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into this Lamy All-Star with a broad nib, wrote with it for a day, and then used it to take my notes for this video. In order to have some standardization, I always use Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper in the first writing samples, although there is an additional writing sample with different papers later in the video. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, spots of shading. Like in Plume, it starts a little darker, gets a little lighter, and then a bit darker again. So the stub is offering some very nice shading here. The extra fine is a little bit darker than the 1.1. It has no feather spread, halo sheen. It has a ton of very nice shading. Quick, starts dark, gets light, gets very dark again. Brown starts dark and gets light. Nice stuff. 6 seconds to dry. Medium is darker than the extra fine. Medium has no feather spread, halo sheen. It still offers some shading. Like brown, starts dark, gets light, gets very dark. Same thing with Fox. Starts dark, gets lighter, gets very dark. It does that quite a bit. 11 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both show us plenty of color variation. Got to look far left to far right. And we do get plenty of color variation in the writing. Tomoe River. No bleeding, normal Tomoe River ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is slightly darker a tone than the 1.1 with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 11 seconds to dry. The medium is darker than the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 26 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both show us no color variation. We didn't expect it, and we didn't get it. And Rhodia. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and it does offer some shading. It's just going from a very light, like on the right of Plume, but if you look to the left, as you move left, it's getting darker. And from the UM, as you move right, it's getting darker. So it's going from a light to a mid-tone. And it does it quite a bit in the writing, like in Burgundy. The R is very light, but the B was much darker. So it worked its way light, it worked its way dark, it worked its way light again, and then dark again. It's very nice shading here. The extra fine is a little darker than the 1.1 with no feather spread, halo sheen, and yes, some very nice shading. It's just not doing as gradual a shade as the stub did. Quick starts darker, gets a little lighter, then much darker again. Brown starts darker and gets lighter. It's very nice stuff. Fox starts lighter and gets darker. 8 seconds to dry. Medium is darker than the extra fine. It has no feather spread, halo sheen. It does offer some shading, just not nearly as much for being darker. Like brown starts very dark, works its way lighter. The end of the N got very dark. 11 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both do show us color variation looking far left to far right, and we did get it in the writing samples. I agree with Vita that we can learn a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds, and we see a very light lavender color. It's pushing its way up. It's very light, barely there. And then we get this nice magenta and a really interesting purple across the top. Now I know I described one as a lavender and one as a purple. And that's because of the tremendous tone differences, but you could say a very light purple at the bottom. I'm going to stick with the lavender. The one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And that lavender line across the bottom, more there, more staying. Although, for the most part, after that, these two chromatographies look the same. But it does make you wonder how that lavender or purple is really going to stick around. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, I'm impressed with how this ink has held up. I was not expecting real resistance here, and it did it. The writing looks fantastic even after the highlighter went over it. It didn't even notice it. Now, water moved the magenta out of the way and left that purple. So water's not quite enough. Pen flush with only 30 seconds is really starting to break it up. I do believe that with longer than 30 seconds, the pen flush is all you're going to need. We do see that lavender or purple still there, very light. We're starting to see the dots of the Rhodia dot pad come through. I think this is going to be it, given a little more time and some elbow grease. If it's not, 1/3 bleach solution completely obliterated it with only 30 seconds, which means just wash your pen out with water afterwards so you don't rust the metal bits. I test viscosity or flow with a thing called a tilt test. I'll link it somewhere down below or up in the cards. Now, for the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Papier Plume Burgundy has a viscosity of 2.97, making it just a little bit drier than normal. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples. Now, for the inks I've tested, I found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Papier Plume Burgundy has an average dry time of 12 seconds, making it dry just a little bit faster than normal. Instead of finding inks that look like Papier Plume Burgundy, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. Now, I wanted a nice blue and went with Colorverse Crystal Planet. The second writing sample is done on Monocoque, TWSBI, and Moji paper. Here we're looking at Monocoque paper because I like saying that name, Monocoque. No bleeding, some minor ghosting. It would stop me from using the back of the page, but it might not stop you. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is slightly darker than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade, and 5 seconds to dry. Medium is much darker than the extra fine. No feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 8 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine and the medium aren't really showing much color variation. It's a little bit far left to far right, but it's not coming through in the writing sample. TWSBI notebooks. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen. It has spots of shading. The dot of the I, the R, the P, the E, they're all a little bit darker than the letters around it. So there is some shading to be had here. The extra fine is slightly darker, really very slightly darker than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and still shading spots to be found, just not tons. The K in quick, B in brown, E in the, let's see, the P in jumps, all darker than the letters that are around it, 7 seconds to dry. Now, the medium being much darker, it has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shading at all. 10 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine is showing color variation from left to right, not the medium, which is how it worked out in the writing. Last up is Moji paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. The extra fine is the same tone. Same tone as the 1.1 with no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. 6 seconds to dry. Medium, significantly darker than the other writing on the paper with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 8 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby of the extra fine showing color variation, but we got none. Scrubby of the medium, far left to far right, shows some, got none. And that is all that I have for the writing samples. So what do I think of Papier Plume's Burgundy? This is a very nice magenta, but it also has some bits about it that lean purple, depending on the pen. Now, it gives a very nice gentle tone that makes other people really want to read what you wrote. So when giving messages to people, it delivers messages in a kinder, gentler way. So what nib and pen give the best writing experience with this ink? I found a dry broad really put down a nice tone and gave it the ability to offer the shading that I enjoy so much. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and if it's your first time here, I'm going to remind you, if you enjoyed it, subscribe. Thanks for watching.